So, Brian Wong, this was the weirdest day I can almost I don't think this has happened in 2.5 years on my channel. I Nobody knows why the stock market does what it does, but most days you can at least kind of guess, or you can go, well, that this makes sense. Today was not that day. I mean, the stock
Mhm.
market in general today being flat, that wasn't such a big surprise. But Tesla going up 4.5 or 5, whatever percent it ended up at the end of the day. Uh,
Right,
and it started that way, early in the morning, even more. I think it was up
right,
7% at one point.
right.
And Rivian and uh,
Lucid.
Lucid also went up. Now,
Hmm.
if Tesla had gone up by itself, I
Yeah,
can explain it 15 different ways. But
right.
why did the other two go up?
Yeah,
Completely
yeah.
blowing my mind. So what did you have any theory or any idea of what you thought was happening today?
Um, I don't care about Rivian and Lucid. Their stock movements is noise to me, and
Okay.
it is meaningless noise,
Okay.
right? So what I think is for Tesla is that we're on the verge of June 1st,
Yeah.
right? And so some people are finally getting ahead of that. Um, there also could be some who may have positioned based on they think that the tariff thing with China is going to go to a less escalated state, and that's good for Tesla too.
Right.
So there's various things that are good for Tesla, but I think the main thing that I think is the driver is that potential real FSD is, Robotaxi is here. Someone could have got wind of something related to that, and so they may put on position to take advantage of that. And then also there is the lower price cars. So I think the the move that we've both been expecting, saying
Right.
that hey, this could happen and we could get to all-time highs, in June, maybe even in May, that this could be the beginning of that. And then I know that you asked me about technicals. Everyone and their dog was saying 295 was the technical level that Tesla had to break. Tesla broke it and they held it through Friday.
Held it
So now we
well.
have weekly close over 295. That's right. So that opened up 320 to 370, depending on who you're talking to. So technical strength heading up into potentially good macro and heading into the possibly biggest catalyst of
Ever.
some form of robotaxi and lower price cars. Yeah, a 1-2 punch that would be just huge. Yeah.
Right, right, right. Okay, so let's talk about a couple of the different elements. So let's talk about China. We've got talk starting tomorrow. Bessent
Mhm.
sending his top guy. I mean, sending they're I guess already there in Switzerland, going to meet for other purposes with other people. But we do have this meeting. There's been a lot of back and forth, a lot of chest beating
Mhm.
on both sides.
Yeah.
Um, so, what are you hearing? What are you thinking? How do you think this first weekend plays out?
Um, I think that a deal has to happen. The whole calculus that the that Bessent and Lutnick have said is that because of the weakness of China's economy at this point, high unemployment rates, weak real estate markets, other issues with China, and the fact that we're talking about they need to export 3, 4 times as much to us as we need to import, from them. That these trade deals hurt them more, right? They're more export focused, and so a deal needs to happen. And the fact that the sooner they recognize that and instead of posturing, then the better it is for them. So the some thing that I've been hearing is that they have been feeling it in terms of layoffs of from companies and that kind of thing. So there's it's not in their interest to drag it out, is my thinking.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So obviously you can't make a deal in one weekend. You could come up with a framework.
Yeah.
You could come up with a couple of bullet points coming out of tomorrow.
Mhm.
But uh, typically something as complex as the China deal is going to take months, if not years.
Right.
But I think we talked about in the green room. I'm hearing the president saying, "Hey, we'll come down to 80%." It was kind of his opening salvo for the weekend.
Mm.
Punditry, I think, is talking about a 50% tariff being okay. That
Yeah,
test, I mean, that the U.S. could live with a 50% um, uh, import tariff from them. Now that
yeah,
the tariffs were 20% already, right? So going
right.
50 would be only a slightly more than
Two and a
double.
half, but yeah,
Two and a half.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. So, yeah, I don't expect a full deal to happen. They would have to, have a bunch of back channel stuff they have been talking about for them to get to that point, which doesn't seem likely.
Right.
But getting to a point where they think, okay, we're the framework. We got a framework. We're willing to step it down while we have the framework. We're willing to talk and be more reasonable with each other while we're in serious discussions. At the gesture of good faith, we're getting reasonable again because we're not like trying to send messages anymore. Messages have been sent and received. So, so I think that. Sorry, give me one second here.
Absolutely. Okay. So one of the big questions that has been bantied around this week on my channel, and I don't think you've been part, I'm pretty sure you haven't been a part of the discussion yet, is the rare earth minerals deal. So it seemed like that was China's, what they thought would be the killer, the big stake in the heart that would cause the United States to come to the table, and it might have had some impact on President Trump backing off a bit. But I also read extensive articles during the week. I'm not sure if you've seen any of these or heard from other people that as important as the rare earths are, um, like a lot of the uses for the rare earths, just make a motor better.
Yeah,
You don't absolutely have to have it.
right,
You can get by without it.
right, right. And then, you can substitute, you should have had some in inventory. So how could a company dependent upon that, where basically things go totally boom, say, I'll only have a 1 month supply or 2 month supply,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Especially because you don't need that much of it,
yeah,
right? So you would then load up.
yeah.
Like, why would you be so stupid as to leave that vulnerability where anything going on with China and the United States, I'm gonna, let my company just go totally tank. It's like it
Right.
doesn't make sense. Yeah. So it'd be on each company to do that. And then for strategic industries for the United States,
Mhm.
you know, Trump would tell, you know, Lockheed or someone, get your act together on this thing. Because I'm about to go have this, 6 month, 12-month thing, and then you got to be able to ride this out, right? So anything strategic important is is covered, right?
Yeah.
He would have, made sure that happened. And there are some other supply to other places so you can ration and get stuff over to the places that need to get to. Um, Also could do recycling. There's, stuff you can do and this is not the first time rare earths have been threatened,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So they've had other disruptions, go back to the first administration, 2016, right? So um, how could you leave yourself totally vulnerable where basically I got a ticking clock and I'm gonna run out? It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. I also read again, I thought a very good article. I haven't reported on this article before, that was saying that in general, given that everybody knew that this was coming, given that
Yeah,
we know people brought in massive amounts of imports before the tariffs took effect, that probably we've got until midsummer before there's really any significant disruptions anyway.
right,
Yeah.
right.
So there's a lot of you know uh crying and screaming and worry about something which maybe isn't as big a deal. Meanwhile, China, from all the reports I'm hearing, you mentioned how bad their economy is, but I'm hearing that it's even bigger than that. That there's a
Right.
lot of unrest, unhappiness, people not getting paid. Uh,
Hmm.
People not getting paid is commonly a real problem.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So, and then that is something where, um, significant levels of unrest can occur where, politically, you know, cities revolting, it's, you know, the people are not necessarily super happy, like they haven't had super fast growth for a long, long time. You've had the property crisis, other things like that. So, um, if you if half of their export market companies had to cut back their staff, that would be a significant um, political risk
Yeah.
where, riots and stuff could happen, right? Because people would be really, really angry. You can try and divert that and blame other people, but it's it can go sideways on them in a hurry.
Okay, let's talk about the big kahuna, the big elephant under the rug. It's not even under the rug; it's on top of the rug, and that is Austin, June 1. Uh,
Mhm.
so, um, generally speaking, there's been a tremendous amount of outpouring of content over the last few days by CERN and others on my
Mhm.
channel and elsewhere. Kathy Wood this morning saying that she's more confident than ever in her 2,600 estimate because the rollout is going to happen. I mean, it just looks like there's very little doubt that it's going to be going ahead if not on June 1, in very early June.
Yeah,
Um, so one of I think the biggest bones of contention really at this point is how fast this rollout takes place. From the very first day, I said I thought that they would have hundreds of vehicles sitting ready.
yeah,
They'd go out with their 10 or 20, but if the second day they needed 50, they'd send out 50. And if the third
Mhm.
day they needed 100, they'd send out 100. And if, that they said they would have their ear to the ground. I mean, it's a very main statement that Elon made is
Yeah,
that we're going to have our ear to the ground and we will increase as needed.
right,
So I really think CERN, I think, said that it would only take 5,000 vehicles to completely eliminate Waymo, Uber, Lyft, taxi cabs. I think everything. It's about
right,
5,000 vehicles. I mean, that's one day's production for Tesla.
right, right,
So it's not like it's a big deal to
right,
add 5,000 if they wanted to in one day.
right. So my view is I believe they go June 1. I think there's no reason to delay even one day. My logic on that is that in 2 weeks, what changes in terms of the software or whatever? Like nothing really changes. Find some other release. But I think the version that they currently have is ready to go. That they're ready to shove out, even now if they had to.
Mhm.
Suddenly some emergency happened, you must release. They would go with what they have, and what they have now is sufficient to go.
Right.
Obviously, always things can be better, but there's no reason to delay. With 10 cars, 20 cars, they can do that with the risk management. You said that they won't do any um, remote driving,
Right.
right? That only it will be some kind of emergency pullover, some other things of like a car stuck, and then they'll do some kind of assistance on that. So that being the case, then again, if I go up with 10 cars and manage it, they did that for Cybercab Day. They had
Yeah.
10, 20 cars in a small area, right? So 10, 20 cars in a small area, the my restriction is just, how far I'm going, what ride I'm giving,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
They're moving it back a week, 2 weeks, 4 weeks doesn't help me with anything, right? I can just say the restrictions in terms of like how fast I roll out is how big is the area, how much do I use it, that kind of stuff.
Right.
So I view the June 1 as a locked in date.
Okay.
Like if I'm internal to Tesla,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? And then I've gotten a June 1 date from Elon. Say I want they said the internal date is June 1, right? How does it help me employment wise, bonus wise, anything wise? It's also like knowing how Elon operates. If I'm managing that program, I'm the one, the executive in charge. I'm the VP, whatever, in charge of that. And instead of coming out June 1, I want to go out June 8th. Do I still have a job coming back June 8th? I don't think so. right?
Yeah.
Is my prospect of being promoted now way, way less? Yes, right? So going on June 1 and managing whatever issues happen, that's in the interest of the VP who's in charge of this program,
Right.
right?
Right.
Or even the, CTO or whoever else is doing it, right? So the internal um, motivations to me make a June 1 a lock. Then the other part of it is wait times. So as Stern said, 5,000 to do the whole city, 2,000 if I'm not paying taxi drivers and whatever, right? So it's 300 square miles. Um, Waymo has gone out with a service that they've had in San Francisco with about 200, 300 cars for a significant fraction, 25% of San Francisco. San Francisco only has 50 square miles. So they were probably only doing like 20 square miles. So that would be about like 8 to 10% of the 300 square miles of Austin, right?
Yeah.
So that is the 300 level cars. They already have 150, 200 some cars that
Right.
are giving rides to employees in Austin, right? So why won't they're doing supervised employee rides now?
Hmm.
If I say supervised everyone rides with those same people, that seems to make sense. And I go with the 1020 cars. And now we're the 1020 cars doing Robotaxi unsupervised. They're doing their stuff. And we're giving um, reasonable wait times for a reasonable area to have those 150, 200 people. And also I have the app. Everyone's seen the app now. It's going to come out. They can have a sign up area for of the 2,000 Ubers in Austin, probably like 100, 200 are Model 3s and Model
Right.
Ys or something
Right.
like that.
Right.
So you get those people just come over automatic because you want them to come over in a year anyway, or
Hmm.
6 months to a year. So have it all come now because it makes for an easier rollout. And I need to get those systems integrated with all that stuff anyhow. So coming out with 400, 500 people, roughly day one, and certainly in the first month, then I can get a reasonable area, reasonable wait times, and I'm shifting towards from from supervised to unsupervised. I'm
Hmm.
going to change the mix up to
Hmm.
get more unsupervised. But if I'm already in the system as a supervised,
Right.
I'm ready to go insurance, cleaning, other stuff to get over into supervised.
Hmm.
So that transition makes total sense between now and going full out. So what do you think? Am I wrong about that?
Who knows? That'd be really interesting. We haven't had any like clue or piece of data to indicate that they would be doing that. But I would also say we don't have any data that says they're not going to be doing that.
Right.
I like the part about the Uber drivers. That would make a real, even if it wasn't from day one,
Yeah.
if they went 15 days and they got X amount of activity, maybe whatever, 30 days, but at some point they could say, okay, all Uber drivers can now get on the app.
Right.
Now we know that Uber drivers, I've been in plenty of Uber drivers that were Uber drivers, Lyft drivers, and taxi cabs. They had all
All three. Yeah.
three in that they were signed up for. So just signing up for Tesla 2,
Yeah.
whether Tesla will be okay with that, I don't know. But potentially Tesla could say, yeah, you can add Tesla to your database of
Yeah.
of opportunity, and just sign up for the app now.
Right. Right. And it sorts out systems. They get data and learning because operationally they want to have that learning. Marketing wise, penetration wise, they want to bring those people over.
Yep.
They want to bring them with their cars over. So it's just a question of when. I think it makes sense to do it off the get-go. But I can also see waiting a few weeks, a month, for whatever reason, during the transition phase, right? But relatively early, certainly before the end of the year, it makes sense. And certainly as I'm scaling up Austin, it
Yeah.
makes sense to bring that other stuff in. And those 150 people who are giving rides to employees, it's like, why don't I have them in my system? One, they're test drivers anyhow,
Yeah.
right? They're virtually expanding my unsupervised thing because there's safety drivers
Right.
in it, right? So having, you know, I could see initially coming out with the 1020, no safety drivers, just to show, hey, it's pure,
Right.
it's no safety driver. And then a few weeks in, okay, we're also going to expand with these guys who are, expanding the data and blah, 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 right? So it's an optics thing, but in terms of like the need for the data, the operation stuff, you need to open it up more.
Yeah.
So
Okay. All right. And we know that, of course, if they can charge market rates in the beginning, that could even be profitable to have the safety drivers in there. And the other thing is, we know from the work that's been done by Bradford Ferguson that he just reported last night on the channel that he's been doing Uber rides. I don't know if you heard that, but he's been out there doing Uber rides, and he's been asking the people that he's been taking on those rides, would you get in a car that didn't have a driver? And they've been saying no over and over again. No, I wouldn't get in the car.
yeah,
So you might even have an option on your, like we have Black or X now on Uber. You might have supervised, driver assist or no driver
yeah,
assist, something like that. And so you could give consumers an option in the beginning as well.
right, right. Uh, so it's meeting consumers where they are,
Right.
and then in terms of them seeing that unsupervised works, you can show them, yeah, I'm supervising. I'm going to be here to make sure things are good, but you're going to notice I didn't touch this thing.
Yes.
So in order to get that firsthand experience, because you'll need to convert people with a lot of people with firsthand experience, or like, and then you can tell your friends and blah blah blah,
Right.
right?
Right.
So that is something that um, Tesla needs to be not dogmatic about in order to win people over. It's just like they, initially didn't give as many test rides, to people, and they did a lot of test rides and that kind
Sure,
of stuff.
sure, sure.
So getting in that now they test rides and they say they need to show test rides with FSD. So this is test rides with FSD that they need to have happen. And having, again, the drivers, the people giving test rides out there is a form of marketing that will win people over to FSD, and also to constantly see, here's the most up-to-date version of the software and how good it performs. So that kind of uh, advertising, direct experience is something that's needed. Again, it goes to, I need to have supervised to bridge people over.
So as important as the rollout on Robotaxi is, the other thing that happens between now and the end of the year, according to Elon, is at some point we're going to get the next version, whatever this version is that's going to be used in Austin. All of us are going to get that version for our car. Now that means hardware 4 people are going to get that version. I don't know about hardware 3, but hardware 4 people are going to get that version. So that could come out before Austin, or it could come out simultaneous with Austin, or it could come out after, I suppose. But at some point, we're going to get that version, which is another catalyst. And then between now and the end of the year, we're going to get, you and me, at least in hardware 4, we're going to be able to do unsupervised. So those are massive catalysts.
Yep.
Do you see any front running on that, even after Austin's open and we're starting to get information flow in terms of how many rides and how many accidents, et cetera? As that information flow comes in and the stock is now taking all that into consideration, is the promise of unsupervised, will that be a FOMO for me? And if I was completely separate and I was the only person betting on the stock, I would be wanting to bet on that almost as much as just as the Robotaxi.
I think that until they see 500 to 1,000 unsupervised vehicles, and then, pretty much unsupervised, handling significant chunks of Austin, that kind of thing, and whatever other city they go to, and expanding out to other cities. The pace of that rollout expansion is the bigger signal for major investors. They don't, even us, to think the advanced, if we go to the Tesla community, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we went to Herbert, went to, Bradford and stuff like that, and say, okay, are you going to anticipate the next, the big release, unsupervised release, version, 14 or whatever, right? They would say no.
Mm-hmm.
And a bunch of them would say, show me the money, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think there's any chance that significant major investors are going to anticipate and front run that. Right? They would need to see the other effects of it in terms of fast rollout, scaling past 500, past 1,000. Scale past 500, scale past 1,000, then you're at Waymo levels and going beyond that. So the whole notion that Waymo's ahead,
Hmm. Hmm.
you'll have your cognitive dissonance of like, oh no, they have more cars than Waymo now unsupervised. So then that forces them to like bump Tesla ahead of Waymo. So then they have to say, okay, now, and they scaled up in X months versus or X weeks versus 10 years.
Right.
And then the question would be, when does these scaling, ramping, improving software, rolling out of services finally force Ford or Xiaomi or someone else to do the licensing deal? And then that would be a big signal to
Wall Street. Yeah.
the Wall Street and the analysts.
Okay, let's play out. You're in my PTs, okay?
Mhm.
Because I changed my price target over the weekend. I don't know if you saw that. I didn't change the price target, but I changed kind of the date, and I also gave a little bit more of a nuance around how I get there. So we've already got about 5% of that today.
Mhm.
So, so getting to 488 is now 12 points, higher, easier than it was.
Yeah.
So we only have 188 to go. So, so what I said was, I think 100 points of that will come from FOMO, or $100 of that will come from FOMO between now and the end of the month, or possibly into the month. Maybe it'll take a week or two, but about 100 points will be FOMO or related to the Austin rollout. And the other 100 points would be the macro, as Tesla tends to be about 3 times the S&P, sometimes 3.5 times the S&P, 2 to 3 times the NASDAQ, which is always about 1.5 times the S&P. So on
Mhm.
percentages, all that in percentages. So
Mhm.
that if the S&P gets back to all-time highs by the end of the month, then and NASDAQ would probably be close to or at all-time highs, then Tesla would be back to all-time highs. So what do you think of my analysis for between now and May?
End of May.
Well,
You- or
end of May into June. Yeah.
end of May into June. Yeah. So I think that right, it is dependent upon how strong the signals are. Um, um, Based on my mid-range scenario of how I'm expecting to see, you know, this the China-US tariff thing going into this neutral mode,
Mhm.
where things have cut back a bit and they're in discussions, and so the heat is off that some. I'm expecting 10 to 20 of the supposed other deals with other countries to start rolling in because we are getting, I think end of June would be when the 90 days is up,
Right.
right? So they need to start putting those away, and there's motivation to do that. So, and then also there could be something with, an Iran deal, blah, blah, blah. So
And
other
the
things could happen
and
now,
the tax deal by the end of June too.
right? Tax deal they do. So macro could get substantially better. If everything went wonderful in macro, yeah, then, things could really start roaring back, um, stronger than the 100 points that you're talking about for Tesla. But I think, yeah, and over under getting back 100 points. Basically, because we're over 295, we can have nothing and just on momentum go back to 350, right? We're in that zone where we can just like rise up to 350 because things are kind of like better.
Mhm.
So then 100 points going back to 400. At 400, we're only like, like two strong moves to all-time highs. Even like a one really good move to all-time highs. We've been on the verge. It's like, yes, it's like 180 points, but really it's like, 320, 350, 380, and then
And then
448. So it's only like five levels in between, right? So moving through the floors is actually, and because we already moved through one floor, holding it for a week, getting to 350, you know, we can still drop back down, but also not that much can bump us back up to high levels. Um, so macro looking like it would help us really hold 350 and to get to 400 means that any whiff of good news on anything pops us back to all-time highs. Um, so so I agree with you that that can happen. That we're set up with now over 295, now with macro looking like it's going to ease. Then then